So this is Michael Strong with When School's Not Working. I'm the founder of Expanse Online, a school for children ages 8 and up where we help you discover and develop your child's genius. We cater to creative, entrepreneurial, and intellectual children, many of whom hate school. And I myself love learning and hate school. And I think we've got an interesting guest tonight on that theme. So we've got Clint Townsend, who's known as our digital marketing guru. But Clint has many other things he can say about himself. So Clint, you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why I might not be delusional to think you're not a fan of schooling, traditional schooling?
Yeah, sure. I think that I can give you sort of my background, and I think that some of the questions around when school's not working or why school doesn't work will reveal itself, and going over my background and how it's sort of led to my life today. Just as a disclaimer, I want to say that I have no particular expertise in education policy, educational theory. So everything I say tonight will be pure opinion and conjecture without much knowledge of the data and literature in this particular field. But everything I say will be informed by that which I am an expert in, which is, my own experience. So with that said, I grew up in Amarillo, Texas. Amarillo is a dusty railroad town up in the very top of Texas, sort of isolated from the rest of the state. The closest city is maybe Lubbock. It takes 12 hours to get even to Houston. So, I only really knew that area growing up, and I had a very typical upbringing, especially for what it means to be a West Texas kid. So, imagine, what you might imagine basically from Friday Night Lights. And indeed, sports was a huge part of my life. I played a lot of sports growing up, but baseball and football was my primary focus. So that's where a lot of the time was sort of focused with my family, and I'm an only child. So, my sports career was really our familial focus. And of course, that's the case with many students. The school systems really push this to the detriment of the real education. So the sports programs get way more funding than anything that you're going to get on the true educational side of things. But growing up, I didn't actually have a huge emphasis on intellectual life, on planning for my future, my professional endeavors, and certainly not entrepreneurship. And I consider myself something of an entrepreneur today. But that all did start to change in about 2007. I got more interested in intellectual life and ideas, and became more interested in notions of individual rights, economics, history, war and peace, and to a lesser extent, started thinking about the rest of the world and becoming more cosmopolitan. You have to realize I travel full time now, but to a West Texas kid in Amarillo, I could have never conceived of a life of travel. But
so I want to interrupt you, Clint, on a couple of points. First, going way back when you apologized for not being an expert in education, as will become clear, I think most of the experts of education support a fraudulent and abusive system. So, I don't know about education policy. Look, these people study this for a living, they get doctorates, they do research, and they support a system that I think is mostly fraudulent and abusive. And I think as we dig into it, you won't disagree too much with that. But the other thing, so just getting that out of the way, the other thing is I'd love to know in 2007, how old were you? What triggered this transition? Was it just like, a bolt of lightning from the sky, or give us a little bit more nuance?
Yeah, so certainly. In 2007, I was 16 years old. I was almost 17 years old, and the 2008 presidential election was sort of ramping up. And I got interested in Ron Paul's political campaign. Now, I'm not particularly associated with, with him or his, the company he holds these days, but I did get interested in the essence of the principles. And, that's sort of what got me started in my intellectual life. Up to that point, I mean, I cannot stress enough how little I engaged in ideas. And I'm embarrassed to say, I don't know that I ever read a book cover to cover until I was maybe 16 or 17 years old, just because that's not the culture in that area. And sure, there was opportunities to really engage in intellectual life, but the emphasis was you need to be a sports star and go on to college and maybe even beyond. So, and if you're a smart kid, then, you know, you're going to be ostracized, right? You're weird and you're a nerd.
And just to check in, were you doing well in school? Did you like school? Did you hate school? What was school like?
I did well, you know, I would nothing special. I took, you know, all the advanced classes that I could, and I chose the most rigorous schedule, but I was never particularly preoccupied with getting, you know, A's, straight A's, right? So grade inflation wasn't something that I cared too much about, probably to my, you know, my detriment, because, you know, that limited my school options. You know, I did go to the University of North Texas, and but you know, that was suitable for me. I'm a first generation, you know, college kid, and you know, any university, it was all basically the same to us. So yeah, I would speak to that.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting to me too is, you know, I certainly, yeah, now you are well read, but that you hadn't read a book until maybe 17 or something is striking. And part of what tells it to me is, and I went to a school in northern Minnesota, so you know, different culture, but basically not intellectual, small town farmers. You know, sports was much more than you know, school. And yeah, some of us got good grades and whatnot, but I remember being struck by, and I wonder if your experience was similar, that it just wasn't that hard to do reasonably well at school. You just kind of went through the motions, but you didn't, right, you weren't connected to ideas. You just kind of do the work, get the grade, and go on, but not processing a whole lot internally. Is that accurate?
Right. No, that's certainly right. And the where I did become passionate and cared about, you know, my performance was in real world situations. So it was because of my interest in politics that I started submitting letters to the editor to the local newspaper. And, you know, this is the newspaper that had a publication of maybe 100,000 people. And seeing my name in print and writing, you know, legible, clear, cogent, convincing arguments of maybe only 200 words, that's really, you know, I started thinking myself more and more as a writer. But that was, you know, extracurricular, right? That was what I was pursuing sort of on my own on my outside. And frankly, I was chastised when I would come to school the next day, and, you know, my coaches had seen me arguing against the IRS or something like that. Then, you know, they would, you know, say that I was crazy for thinking these things, right? And, you know, so that it almost made me a bit of an outcast to be, you know, engaging in, you know, the political scene in that regard. But I did discover a passion for writing, which I think sort of played into my current professional pursuits.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say you are an excellent writer. You organize ideas really well. And one of the things I always tell our students is that writing, you know, there's a cliche about English, you know, language arts classes when you have 10th grade English, write on the symbolism of blah, blah, blah. Nobody cares. It's meaningless. I make the point that no, writing is organizing your thoughts well. So when I get a kind of weekly marketing memo from Clint, it's boom, 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 boom. It's organized. You know, in some ways it's not magic, but I'm sure you've seen lots of crappy writers, including people who maybe majored in English in college, but they can't organize thoughts worth squat. So totally get how both, how that could then lead to writing as part of your vocation.
Sure. Well, and of course, there's the, you know, running joke about academic writers and academic writing being completely, you know, unreadable, right? So it's, you know, it is those who maybe are professionals in writing, at least in an academic setting, that, you know, I suppose they're engaging in jargon and whatnot because they're, you know, speaking to those in their field. But, you know, I think even those in their field and sometimes admit they don't know what they're reading.
Right. Well, you probably know about the famous so-called paradox, where, and yet there's a newer one, so-called squared, where these people faked journal articles, academic journal articles for postmodern journals, and nobody knew that they were faked, that they were, you know, total BS, and they got published as academic. So yes, maybe there's some jargon that's useful, and a lot of it is just nonsense.
Yeah.
But I actually do want to know, you know, how did you even get into Ron Paul? Was it like TV? Were your parents talking about it? Did you have friends?
I knew zero people growing up who were ever interested in politics. And frankly, it would probably have been better for me if I never got interested in politics, other than the fact that that's what started, you know, that got me into reading books and ultimately, you know, going from dry nonfiction, political, economic treatises, right, to, reading more fiction, rich literature, and, all of the benefits that come with that. Yeah, I think I just started watching some of the debates, and it just, was something that I became, very, intensely interested in, to the point that I was, coming home from school and, researching everything about the election, keeping up with the horse race, but also really learning more about the principles. Well, just hours every single night when I was after school.
Very cool, very cool. So 16, you're like a high school junior or sophomore or something when you become interested in ideas. And then tell us about college and the transition to college and all of that.
Sure. So yeah, going into college, I maintained my interest and passion in politics. I wish I would have had more of a grounding in entrepreneurship and business, and so I regard this time as beneficial in some ways, but ultimately you'll see why it's been a bit of a waste. In college, I started another political student group. I got involved with a lot of nonprofits and started doing internships in Washington, D.C. So, having spent a lot of time in D.C., I really enjoyed being away from Texas, but also engaging with a bunch of really smart people. So I started seeing that being my future. And by the way, all the time that I was, spending in, my student group and doing internships, working and volunteering for nonprofits, my studies were really an afterthought. And, the areas that I was studying, that I could study in the first place, it was just, never really much thought into what, why I was going to study. I studied economics and political science, by the way. And, I never asked myself, what am I going to learn from these programs that's going to make me valuable in the marketplace at some point? I chose them because it was just something that I had a, pre-existing interest in, but there was really never any investigation of that. And, I can't, my parents didn't go to college, so it was hard for them to, guide me in this regard. But yeah, I was lucky to be able to have graduated within 3 years. So that's another thing. That was the one sort of fortunate part of high school, is that I was able to accrue something like 39 hours. So I had a full year shaved off already going into college.
And then, I've heard you talk about college being a waste of time. So how did you, or what led you to believe that college was a waste of time? Talk a little bit about that transition.
Yeah, I did not know that it was a waste of time until after the fact, right? And I think this is the problem for a lot of people, that I regard college as a scam, but I only know that now, having graduated now 9 years ago. My goodness, I've not thought about that number in a while, but and here's the reason I say that. I guess the one way that it helped me was to get my first job. If I went to my first job and I didn't have a degree, then maybe I wouldn't have been able to secure that position. It's probably the case that I would have done something even better, frankly. But I guess one thing that I want to impress upon parents and students as well, that it's only after you've gone through the college that you really get a sense of that it is a scam. Nobody cares about what program you pursued. And if they care at all, they only care that you were able to jump through all the hoops, and that shows that you had enough commitment and determination to get through the silly obstacle course that they put in your way in order to get the degree. And so you don't know that until you've done it. And so for those that haven't done it, just be aware before you invest, $50,000 plus in a degree.
Did you go into debt in college, or did your parents go into debt? I don't need to know the details. But.
Yeah, I was fortunate, not personally to go into debt. This is something that my parents afforded me. I'm an only child, so I'm lucky in that regard. But yeah, sure, they took out loans, and they were able to pay it off by now, of course. But still, that's a huge opportunity cost. I'm a digital marketer now, and you know, I have learned everything. I, I was sort of pushed into doing digital marketing because it happens to match my lifestyle and support, you know, perpetual travel.
Mm-hmm.
And
You're kind of doing a spoiler alert. I have a sequential side to me. So, you know, we've got the high school, we've got the college, first job. Say a little bit about your first job and why college degree, and why you didn't continue to find the college degree valuable. What was the transition?
Well, just because you know, everything that I had to do was just sort of learn on the job. You know, we would face these various challenges. I was working at an organization called Students for Liberty as my first job, right? And so I was organizing college students all around the country to, you know, host events on campus and training them how to basically do what I did in creating student groups and spread ideas and, you know, that sort of thing. And so, you know, of course, there was no program for that. You don't need to learn something like that in college. And by the way, college probably is valuable for somebody pursuing STEM, right? But insofar as we're talking about social sciences, unless you want to pursue a PhD, you know, I'm not so certain that, you know, apprenticeships are highly underrated, you know, in my view. And, you know, I hope that those gain a lot more traction in the coming years.
So you're working for Students for Liberty, and then what happens next?
Sure. So I moved on from there, started working for the Cato Institute. It's a public policy think tank in Washington, D.C. And, you know, I was doing email marketing. So this was sort of my first introduction to marketing there. But again, you know, nobody cared about my degree. That wasn't really an emphasis. It was just that, you know, I had the essential skills already and I had a portfolio. So many employers in general, it strikes me that they never ask to see, okay, show me your actual work that has taken place before you come to me. They're interested in asking silly questions in interviews and knowing your educational background that to me is completely irrelevant. But I was working at the Cato Institute. But I did that until I was about 25. I was highly invested in politics until I was about 25. And it sort of struck me one day that I was super dissatisfied with nonprofits in general. And the upward trajectory of my life just wasn't there. I didn't feel like I was creating value. I never really liked that, you know, my salary was reliant on donors. You know, I always wanted customers, right? People who valued a good or service. And most importantly, I was just bored at nonprofits. So it was at that point that I shifted to startups.
Mm-hmm.
So my first job at a startup actually was at a company called Postmates. It's an on-demand delivery service. And so I was the operations manager in the Washington, D.C. area. Mm-hmm. And so I did that for about 9 months, really enjoyed it. It was, you know, very dynamic and I was learning a lot and getting a real feel for startup life, right? Mm-hmm. And about 9 months into that, there were huge layoffs and I was part of that. Maybe 40, 50 people of my particular position were laid off around the country. They were all, you know, city by city, there was a person like me who was performing that particular role. But these layoffs, it gave me insight into the volatility and the reality of startup life. And it almost sort of felt honorable. It was an honorable moment because I realized that I had to justify my existence at any given company, that I had to provide a return on investment. And that's really started getting me thinking about, you know, what do I need to do? What kind of skills do I actually need to have in order to you know, be valuable to companies, to bring in more money than I cost, which is always my, you know, my priority with my clients today.
Mm-hmm. Just, I don't know, do you know who Charlie Hone is by any chance? H-O-E? So he's a friend of mine. He kind of similar story. He graduated from, I think it was CU in, you know, during the middle of 2008, couldn't get a job, and eventually bootstrapped his way into digital marketing. But he has a book called Recession-Proof Graduate. One of his core principles is, be worth more than you're paid, which in some ways for those of us in the business world is obvious, but I think nobody tells you that in high school. Nobody tells you that in college. You know, it's one of those insights where in the real world, hello, but nobody talks about that.
Yeah, you know, that's the whole thing about school in general, is that I never really got any exposure to business life, and thinking about those really, you know, fundamental, you know, essential questions about, you know, how do you position yourself to be valuable? What, you know, how do you learn skills? What skills are valuable? And it's just the case that the institutions as they are today, college and K through 12, they're anachronistic, and they cannot meet the challenge that we face today, you know, in an era that moves so quickly.
So we're going to go back into bashing school later, but I want to. So and I love how honorable you are in terms of it felt good to be fired, so to speak, or laid off. So take us through that next transition.
You know, in retrospect, it was a great thing to happen, because I moved away from Washington, D.C., and I was no longer attached to that city. And, you know, the idea that I might re-enter, you know, nonprofits and politics, activism, that sort of thing. You know, it's still the case that that's all a life project of mine, and advancing, you know, humanist principles is something that's important to me, and deeply, something I care deeply about. But because of this, because I was laid off, I had a chance to think, where, you know, what do I want to do now? I wanted to continue to invest in startups and work for startups. So I moved to Austin. One, because I was moving back to Texas, but of course, Austin is a completely different experience than my hometown of Amarillo, or where I went to school outside of Dallas. And I did get a job at a startup, and I worked there for a couple of years. And this was a truly formative experience, and something that shined a lot of light on mainly what I don't like in my professional life, right? It was a real exposure to office culture, and one that I thought was not necessarily unique to the company I was working for, but it was just sort of the immutable condition of office life, of working in an office. And I found it intolerable, and could not see myself doing that 9-to-5 grind for the rest of my existence. You know, and so these realities of office culture really started to set in. And what I mean by that is experiencing moments where rules were more important than providing value or results, where being physically present in an office was important at all. You know, having needless meetings to feel like we're doing something. You know, and just being so profoundly bored, to the point that I remember looking out the window. You know, thankfully, I had a window in my office, and watching the birds and being envious of the birds. Wishing that I could be outside feeling the sun, and have that, you know, at least some level of autonomy. You know, along those lines of autonomy, the soft power that's exercised in office life is something that I found also intolerable, and, you know, the politics that go into it. So that it was also around this time that I started traveling, and really getting exposed to that life, and that, you know, that's a whole other, you know, path that we can pursue.
Right. So just to get clarity, the irony, of course, is here we're bashing school, bashing university, and then you get to a startup, which many people think is cool and fun, and it's boring office politics. So, you know, you don't have to throw them under the bus by name, but were you in the software industry? What kind of industry were you in? And if you call it a startup, to get to the point, it doesn't sound like, you know, 5 scrappy people or 10 scrappy people. It sounds a bit larger than that. So give us some context about how a startup can be so deathly boring and full of politics.
Yeah, and, you know, I say startup, the company is actually probably 10 years old, and, you know, but it's about 30, 40 employees at its begiggest, and just lots of new projects constantly spinning off. But my particular role was just, you know, I consider myself something of a professional emailer, and maybe, you know, being able to get into the data and doing entry and data maintenance and all of that And, you know, it's maybe perhaps the case that I just had the wrong job. Maybe I was at the wrong company. But I think that a lot of what I experienced there is probably a problem across lots of different, you know, industry-wide. And, you know, I guess I can exemplify this in one story that I have. You know, I was rushing to work one day, and it's always customary for, it was customary for me to stop and get a breakfast burrito. And so I went, got in line. It was a drive-through, and that day the line was a little bit long. So I knew I was going to be a little bit late. No big deal, right? So, you know, I'm working a white-collar job. It's not like I have meetings or somebody waiting on me at the office. And so I get my food and I rush to the office. I you know, peel into the parking lot about 9:05. And I walk in to the office, grab a cup of coffee, and sort of discreetly move into my office, hoping that nobody noticed. And, you know, I open up my laptop and I look in the top corner to see what time it is. And it's 9:06. Great, no problem. 6 minutes late. It's not really an issue. It was that day that I had my regularly scheduled like one-on-one with my manager, and 10:30 rolled around and it was time to meet. And the first item on the agenda, it turns out, was to discuss that he noticed that I was late 6 minutes that morning. And I was sort of in disbelief. I thought he was like joking. I go, oh, I was only 6 minutes late, you know, no problem, right? And it was a problem. So I was stunned that this was an issue. You know, this moment might seem inconsequential to a lot of people, but it was deeply distressing to me that I, you know, because I was late that day, you know, he was suggesting that I was adversely impacting the office culture and encouraging other people to be late and sloppy, when in fact I care deeply about the quality of my work and producing desirable outcomes, which to me is the only thing that matters in a company that's concerned about its bottom line.
Right.
So that was a formative moment. And it was at that moment that I told myself that I would not suffer those indignities any longer. And I started planning to, very dramatically, to leave the country, but for a number of reasons, so that I could retrain myself. And I had seen in traveling and going on long vacations that travel was easy, that it was eminently possible to live this way because I had seen other digital nomads. I had met other nomads. Mm-hmm. And I needed to keep my cost of living low enough for long enough such that I would have time to retrain myself in a more lucrative skill set that could be done, you know, in a way that, you know, where I controlled my destiny and my day-to-day, you know, life, basically.
So of course, because the name of your company is 6 minutes late, I knew that this was the punchline. So give us a timeline from the day of that meeting to when you escaped, and how did you, yeah, is this like a week later, a month later, a year later? Did you save up money? Did you already have some clients or skills? How prepared were you to jump off the cliff, so to speak?
I was not very prepared at all. This was the fall of 2017, and I did not leave the country until winter of 2019. So it was a year and a half, but I think it was a prudent decision to save up a lot of money, have, you know, enough for basically a year, and probably longer than that if I had wanted to stay at, you know, $1 per night hostels in Southeast Asia. That was not my goal. So yeah, so I started preparing, you know, all that I would need, you know, basically the essentials. So, you know, what do I need to pack? You know, I got to start selling all my stuff. You know, what skill sets am I going to try to invest in and learn so that I can work remotely and get new clients? It was around this time that I got my first social media client while I was still working for this company full time. And it was sort of by accident. Somebody asked if there was, you know, anybody that could do this kind of work. And I sort of timidly rose my hand, and, you know, I didn't feel super confident that it would be something for me, but I'm glad that I, you know, did that because it gave me the confidence that I needed to say, oh, well, I'm producing results for this person. Why can't I do it for 10 clients every month and replace my income plus?
And so just to give context, at this point, you described yourself as a professional emailer. So you'd had like 6 or 7 years of kind of professional marketing experience, but all email and no social media, or is that not quite accurate?
Oh, Michael, when I say professional emailer, I mean just emailing to coordinate different things around, you know, the office and with different people all day. So yes, I did some email marketing properly when I was at one of the nonprofits, but generally, I mean, I was just sending emails all day to coordinate, do this, do that. I've done this, thanks, you know, all of that. And so my skill set was quite limited. You know, if I could do anything that was a remote type of work, it would be customer success. You know, basically just talking to customers, leading them through different processes, onboarding them to software or, you know, a new platform or whatever it might be. But I knew I would have to figure out some sort of skill set and learn, you know, a different, you know, skill altogether before I would be ready to, you know, before I would be able to make income independent of that job.
And so then you saved up your money for a year. At some point, you walk out the door. Did you already have skills? You had one client. What's the whole skill development trajectory?
Right. So I walked into my boss's office, brought in the CEO of the company, and just told them point blank, "Hey, I'm leaving the country. Here's my plan. And if I can work remotely, great. You know, I wanted to ask. I didn't think that they would go for that. But you know, and if not, you know, it's been great knowing you, and I wish you all the best of luck." Very fortunately, I was given the opportunity to continue working for them in a remote capacity for the preceding 6 months once I left the United States. And this sort of gave me the springboard that I needed to really dive into nomad life at its fullest, because I was still earning the same, salary that I had, but you know, I was not working that much when I was in the office. And I think that that's the case with a lot of jobs. You go in, maybe work a couple hours, and then you look busy for the rest of the day. That was the part that was horribly boring to me. School, frankly. But, you know, now that I was not, you know, having to be monitored, that gave me the time to start thinking about, okay, at the end of this contract, it was just a 6-month contract, and then I would be let go after that. What am I going to do to be able to, earn money and to be able to continue to live like this so that I don't have to return to the United States? And, you know, based on my past background in writing and email marketing, I saw that, digital marketing would be the most lucrative and easy path to pursue. But in a way that, you know, I could easily get, you know, a number of clients, at least from my own network, and continue to, have a profession that would support, you know, travel basically, and also, you know, not be subject to the stupidities of office life, basically.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And by the way, I'm very interested in digital marketing and for kids, for teenagers, and both for teenagers in the US and also teenagers in the developing world. I have seen for some time that, you know, digital marketing can be done from anywhere. Hello, that's nice. People talk about coding all the time. Coding is great. And for the people for whom it's great, perfect. But in some ways, right, I think digital marketing maybe doesn't take as long to get to the point where you can earn money. And then if you're good at it, you know, you can keep expanding and growing and so forth. But almost, yeah, again, I think people your generation are aware of it, but, you know, teachers are not teaching it, schools are not teaching it, universities are not teaching it, or if they are, they're teaching a 5-year-old version, which is ancient history as far as this field goes. And so once you kind of grokked that it was digital marketing, you mentioned earlier YouTube videos. I mean, did you have a mentor? Did you read a book? Did you strictly watch YouTube videos? What's the learning process? And how do you get to the point where you were actually valuable to clients?
Yeah, I started just watching random YouTube videos, and I watched 100 hours basically of and not just digital marketing as a broad concept, but I saw that very quickly that I was going to have to, drill down into one area of digital marketing. And so I started, I thought that Facebook ads would be the most effective way to get into this world. And I saw that a lot of other people were having success with this. So basically I was joining like Facebook groups of other, of other marketers, sharing information, sharing different videos that other people were making. And I saw that I was learning everything that I needed by just watching all these different videos on YouTube, right? All the content is out there. And of course you can pay $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 for all these different courses that exist from different individuals. But, if there's one particular area that you're struggling with, well, you can just, through the force of raw Googling, you can learn just about anything, obviously, right? So, especially when it comes to this particular realm, and technology. That's, obviously that's a reason that I, decided to pursue this route, because, it was a low cost to me. I essentially was able to, within a month, train myself enough to have just a low level base of skills to be able to serve clients. And, I got started from there and have continued to learn more and more. And, here I am today.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And by the way, Clint is great. I don't want you to steal him away from us, but Clint is a great digital marketer. So one of the things that I think you mentioned that's important are the groups. That is, one can Google one's way to learn anything, but I imagine part of what you discovered also by being in groups is almost by osmosis, what kinds of things to focus on, what kinds of things are misleading. That is, when you see a community of experts or learners, maybe expert learners, wherever they are, then you can kind of see, oh, that person says, that information is not so great. This person thinks this is. Even if they argue, you sort of see, oh, on the one hand, on the other hand. Would you say that those groups were an important part of your learning process?
Certainly, yeah. I tried my hand in what's called drop shipping. And this is basically where you buy cheap goods from China. You never touch the merchandise, but you build a site as if you own the merchandise, and then you have it sent from a supplier in China. But the important skill set of that is being able to market it, to build a site that is attractive, and also to run the Facebook ads in the most effective way possible. And so I did join a group of these drop shippers, and basically they're just all marketers. Mm-hmm. And, through basically what you were saying, watching how they were arguing about different, should we run this kind of ad or that kind of ad? What's more powerful? What gets more click-throughs? And, hearing all these different terms and phrases, that really got me sort of thinking and able to form my own opinions on some of these questions. And at least it gave me the base to know what I didn't know, right? Going before that, you don't know what you don't know. So, this took me a step further in that regard.
Yeah, I'm big, and this is very much how I think of training adolescents, is the peer community, even the Socratic expanse, just kids hearing other kids argue about stuff, right? They know what they don't know, they know the range of opinion, they know what people are passionate about. That is sort of the intellectual life, which is a bit different, but still, it's very much peer driven. And in my experience, yeah, it's really hard for most people to kind of just cold through Googly learn things. Again, in principle or in theory, you can learn anything that way. I think the social piece is really important. And I think one of the reasons that schools and universities still exist is the social thing, and not just for fun, but also we all are social creatures. And so, in terms of replacing the obsolete system, for me, it's important not just to flag the fact that through Google, you have content available on everything, but also some kind of peer learning community, I think is really helpful in practice. They kind of get us going. And so basically you had one client, you had a year's worth of savings, you were learning skills quickly, and then it would just sort of bootstrap kind of there, client by client, skill by skill, learning, getting better, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, I was able to leverage my network and the context that I had from my days in nonprofits. And sadly, the time I spent in startup life, it didn't generate that many contacts. I was rather isolated, being the only person or contact for Postmates in DC. So all that was remote. And then in Austin, I just don't think that that was a particularly valuable experience, other than, like I said, learning what I, didn't like. But yeah, I started, going client by, to contact by contact. Everybody that I knew who owned a business, I basically studied their business and sent them a proposal. This was, I don't have the time to do this now, right? But I would prepare a proposal of how I think that my services could help them, and see who had the budget to be able to pursue those strategies. And so I did I got a few clients and was able to just have just enough income, right, to be able to, not lose money each month. So, that was part of the whole strategy of leaving the US, because you can live well in Southeast Asia on $1,500 per month. In the country of Georgia, I think I spent in August of 2019, like $1,030. So, and I was living fine. I had a 1-bedroom apartment, so I didn't require much, right? But my goal was always to, have more money than month, right? And so yeah, matter of going.
I do want to hear the whole list of countries, if you can remember them, just because that's cool. But before going to the fun, cool part, also one of the reasons people say one needs to go to college in particular is to get a network. That, the harsh case would be learn absolutely nothing, but you get a network. I once knew somebody who went to Harvard Business School, and he said he didn't learn a thing there, but it was the world's greatest fraternity, because, had all these basically rich, influential, wealthy, frat brothers that he could check in with for around the world. So in terms of your network, and I hear you kind of in a way cold calling, but cold calling to warm leads. So cold calling is an important skill, again, that I think young people need to learn big time. And by cold calling, you had the good sense to prepare a presentation to show you could add value and yada, yada, yada. But at some point you developed a network that was valuable. It sounds like it was mostly your nonprofit work, that is not so much in high school, not so much in college, not so much in the startups. Would you say the network that became valuable was almost entirely through your nonprofit work?
Oh, 100% through my nonprofit days. And, that I spent 10 years, from the time I was 16 years old to 25, in that world. And so it was 100% that my network was from, not my nonprofit context.
I mean, to some extent, I kind of mentor, my wife's from Africa. I've got a lot of African contacts, and sometimes I find a young African go-getter. And of course, 1,500, a lot of African countries, people average 1,500 a year. So 1,500 a month would be just gobs and gobs and gobs of money. And so I'm always looking for, and I don't have time to walk everybody through everything you went through, but I'd love to have, love to make these sorts of pathways more available to more people. And a lot of this is sort of thinking through how to make this, for people who are already on the inside, and this gets into how do you know what you don't know. For people who know about these Facebook groups, then they learn what you learned and so forth. But I'm very interested in kind of how to make this kind of learning more accessible. Because again, I agree, it's more valuable than most college degrees outside of STEM. But, it's also people don't know. And so I'm very interested in, how to create a nice, clean pathway into coding, digital marketing, video production, all sorts of graphic design, UX, UI design, all these great 21st century jobs that, college, high school, worthless. People learn it, but you learn it, I would say, through contacts and maybe sheer luck, something like that.
Right, certainly.
So how would you recommend, suppose there was a, 16-year-old either in Africa or Guatemala or, inner city US who wanted to start making money? What do you tell this 16-year-old if they're a hustler, and, how do they get to the point where they can make real money?
Well, there's 1.5 million ways to monetize your. I was just thinking before the show tonight about this kid on Snapchat who loves to cook. But so he makes a video and drops it on Snapchat every day, and it's featured at the very front of the Snapchat wall. So millions of people are seeing it. And it's just creative, sort of goofy stuff, But it's not so much the cooking that is that's his passion, that's what he likes to do, but his real skill set is creating videos and marketing it. The question is though, how, do you actually go about learning this stuff? I've had friends who have reached out to me about this, and I really don't have any other better advice than to do what I did. Watch 100 hours of the subject that you're interested in on YouTube. And there's going to be, unless we're talking neuroscience, and there's, probably tons of videos on neuroscience on YouTube. There's going to be some sort of content on there. And that's because it behooves people who make these videos to do it really well and to create information-packed videos, because then they're able to create a following and they're able to monetize their content at that point through affiliate sales, through selling courses, through a multitude of ways. They can monetize their videos on YouTube if they get enough views. So, that's sort of the beauty of the internet right now, is that very similar to the marketplace, in order to, earn money, you have to first create value for somebody else. And that comes in the form of teaching people how to, do things, how to, pursue new professional paths, and learn new skills.
And then there, I would say this philosophical perspective in a certain sense of adding value, creating value, being worth more than you're getting paid. I would say if a student goes through high school or college and does not get those pieces, I would say they're actively damaged, in terms of successful professional life. And where did you think you got this ethos? Is this from your parents? Is this good old Texas? Is this, Ron Paul? Or where did you get all this kind of foundational beliefs?
Yeah, I've been reflecting on this a lot more. I'm a fiercely independent person, maybe because I'm an only child and I just, grew up by myself. Like I said, sports was a huge part of my life growing up. And unfortunately, the last 2 years of my high school baseball career, I had to sit the bench. And I don't think that it was due to the fact that, anything related to merit or skill or, how good I was at the game. It was all because of internal politics and basically gatekeepers, right? So the coach my family wasn't favored, right? We weren't the ones at the booster club, giving money, basically. So just to be frank. And so from that, I probably developed a aversion to gatekeepers, to anybody who could be between me and the decision maker, or, between me and showing my merit, my skill. And that's sort of why I have pursued this path as something of a solopreneur, right? Where, I'm not having to cooperate with anybody except the business owner directly. And if they're happy, then I'm happy, right? And I'm able to, pitch them directly. I don't have to go through anybody. There's rarely any politics. And especially working with small businesses, they have a dogged focus on, on results and value and ROI. And if they don't have a focus on anything else, if they're concerned with clock watching, for example, or, socializing or anything along those lines, it's not going to work out with me and that client, right? So. Right. Value and return on investment, that's something that I care deeply about, and in my current path, and thankfully I'm able to pursue.
And I would say, by the way, that's part of why you're a good digital marketer. That is, it's not just the technical skills. I think that focus is actually part of the value you add. Because there are other people, I've certainly known people who kind of get lost in geeking out about different things. And no, it's not about the geeking out. It's about the focus on what matters, for sure. So I certainly think of digital nomad as a glamorous life, especially living vicariously as you go from place to place. So I don't know if you can remember the whole set of places you've gone to, but give us a little of the glamour of the digital nomad, both the various locations as well as, what's it like?
Yeah, it's been thrilling for the past 2 years, I've got to say, and I love my life. I wake up every morning and I'm happy. I don't care if it's Monday, I don't care if it's Friday. It's all the same to me. And by the way, I work every day, at least for a little while. You know, maybe I have a really light day. Maybe, you know, it's a Thursday and all my clients are satisfied and everything's going well. And I'll, you know, quit working around 2 o'clock and I'll go on a hike. But yeah, next month, yes, so in July, I will go to Greece, and that will be my 30th country to visit. I travel rather slowly, so I stay in any given destination for the maximum time that a tourist is allowed, which is usually 90 days. And so, you know, I get a real sense for each destination. I'm able to really you know, stay there and get a feel for the culture and the cuisine and all the different sites to see. But I also do this because I would be exhausted if I was just constantly moving, right? And so 3 months is a reasonable time, and then I start to get a little bit antsy at that point. But yeah, I started off in Bali. Bali is an incredible place. I learned a lot from that experience. My first apartment I got didn't have air conditioning. I didn't think that that was even a remote possibility. So I didn't even consider that my apartment wouldn't have air conditioning. So, you know, there's been good things about this life and bad things, but you know, that was incredible. It's an amazing place. From there, I went to Malaysia, Thailand, made my way to Europe after about a season spent in Southeast Asia. Spent a month in Hungary, went to Georgia for 4 months, the country of Georgia, not the state. This past year, though, has been remarkable in some ways and a bit of a challenge. And, you know, I've had to really employ my problem solving skills because, of course, the issue of COVID has come up, and I'm somebody who takes it deeply seriously. And, you know, have tried to maintain distance and had no interest in getting sick. So I was in Uruguay at the moment that COVID hit. Actually, I was in Thailand, and that was a bit scary because I saw everything shutting down at the moment that it was all taking place. I was in Thailand around January of 2020, late January, and I said, I'm getting out of Dodge. And so I decided to go as far away as possible, the very southern tip of South America and Uruguay. And I thought there was no possibility that the virus could get there. And of course, we all know in retrospect, that's not the case. But I was evacuated out of Uruguay. I chose to use that benefit with my travel insurance. And I went back to the United States for about 3 months and stayed with my parents, you know, just because of the uncertainty around all of this. By the last summer, I saw that it was, the conditions weren't going to change, and it was just going to be dangerous for about a year. And, you know, my mom is a healthcare worker, and I had a bit of reluctance to stay in the house as she was going to the hospital every day. You know, I mean, if we're all going to get sick, you know, it's probably better to spare some of us. So I had to think about, you know, what are the destinations that are, you know, available to me, and they were very far and few between. And it was the island nations around the world that were available because they're completely reliant on tourism, and they're, you know, they have high unemployment, which I saw otherwise. So this past year, I have traveled 3 months in Aruba. From there, I went to French Polynesia. I can't imagine, I think I'm the only person in human history who has ever traveled from Aruba to French Polynesia. I stayed on the island of Moorea, neighboring Tahiti. I did that for 3 months. I don't recommend 3 months on a small island of 10,000 people. That was a bit difficult. From there, I went to Costa Rica and I stayed in San Jose, the capital city. So I enjoyed being on the mainland and back in civilization. And since that time, I have since arrived in Bermuda, and I've been here since late March now. And Bermuda is great. It's a high quality of life. I was able to get vaccinated because I pursued a short-term residency. So it's been a remarkable way to spend the pandemic, and to do so safely, because yes, I've been traveling and I have exposed myself maybe at the airport and in the, you know, in my flights, but I haven't, you know, I've been radically socially distanced for basically a year on remote islands.
Terrific. So now we have the Matt Barnes question. What is one thing, if you had a magic wand, that you would do to change the traditional school model?
Oh, goodness. What would I do to change school model? I would give kids a lot more access to projects and to, actually trying out different jobs, and not just, doing the typical thing of going into retail, although that there's a valuable experience in that. But, actually trying their hand in what their passion is. And in addition to that, just having the opportunity to consider, the other factors that you don't think about. Will I enjoy working in an office? What kind of city do I want to work in? What kind of income will I need to support my, the lifestyle that I want? Those questions are never addressed in any capacity in a traditional K through 12 public school.
Actually, somewhat related to that, I think that the reaction against child labor from the 19th century went way too far. I think jobs are really, really important for young people in lots of ways, and kind of experience, find out what you like, don't like you said, but also, maturity and adding value. I think the experience of actually adding value somewhere, life change. Cool. And then the Kath Phrase question, what sort of structures would exist if children weren't enrolled in the traditional school model?
Well, what would exist, what existed for millennia, right? I saw somebody post the other day that it's public school that is the experiment. It's not homeschooling that is the experiment. So I don't know that it would be homeschooling per se. Of course we would have qualified teachers, but it would be a lot more natural and less subject to all the limitations imposed by political economy, right? And so when the government gets involved with anything, that's when you get, the stupidities of No Child Left Behind and everything that has come with that. Rather than letting children develop naturally, all I can say is thank goodness that, we have Montessori models and increasingly more alternative education opportunities, which has been sped up by the pandemic, because now parents are seeing how poorly their children are being educated.
Mm-hmm. And we've got a question from Nina. If a student were choosing between a college having co-op programs and an elite college full of connections or direct workplace, what would you recommend with no debt?
Yeah, I would say that an apprenticeship, getting real work experience, is one of the most valuable things. Working with business owners who are, having to think through all the different questions of running a successful business and having direct access to, what's going on in that process.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Clint. And bit by bit, we're going to take away this fear that you're not an expert in education. Even if you say, and of course, they'd be qualified teachers. For me personally, I think qualified teachers think that English class is okay, that science class is okay. And of course, in a context it is, again, maybe for 10%, 20% of kids. But yeah, I think for 30% of kids, maybe 50, 70%, we don't know, I don't know, but we need something radically different. And actually, here's one last question. Do you think that a really bright, motivated kid of, say, 16 could, within a year, learn to do most of what you do? Or is there something that they would be missing because they're so young?
100%. They could learn it, and they could learn it better than me, and they could get more clients and probably be making more money than me. And I see it all the time, actually. There's these marketing bros out there who are making videos, training videos, and I know that they're doing better than I am even. There's a story of some kids who got into this drop shipping business, right? They were ordering products directly from China, and they were marketing it to people in the United States. They were from Michigan, and they got investigated by like the SEC or some agency because they weren't actually fulfilling all the orders or anything along those lines. But I know that they were making a ton of money, and they were kids who are 15, 16 years old. And that took some initiative even to figure it out. And I don't know if they were scamming people or what exactly happened. There's a lot of problems that can happen with drop shipping, but even to scam people, they had to really figure out things in a sophisticated way.
Yeah, I actually had a student who was started to get into drop shipping. His brother was into that kind of thing, and he decided it was a little bit too scammy, so he backed out. But certainly in terms of marketing, it is one way to learn marketing.
Right.
But it's been great to have you on the show, Clint. So thanks, and thanks for the good work you do. And hopefully we can help lots of young people have great careers doing cool things, and some of whom may be digital marketers leading glamorous lives. And with that, I'm Michael Strong with When School's Not Working, founder of Expanse Online, where we help your child discover and develop their unique genius. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Michael.